Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would advise our hard of hearing guests that you may move forward and to your left to take advantage of the interpreter this evening. And at this time, would you please welcome Dr. Edmund T. Gordon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
That's how it is, huh? All right. Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much. That's a little bit more lively and a little more of the kind of back and forth that we're trying to get going here in the Black Studies area. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you the 29th president of the University of Texas at Austin. Greg Fenves began his appointment as president of the University of Texas at Austin on June 3rd, 2015, so he's been with us for a little over a year. Previously, he served as the university as an executive vice president and provost. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering, the highest national honor awarded to engineers in the United States, and holds the Cockrell Family Chair in Engineering, number 15, at UT Austin. Bringing a career of teaching, research, and administrative experience to his new position, Fenves' accomplishments included defining strategic academic goals and priorities to advance excellence, streamlining operations for more cost effectiveness, focusing on continuing UT Austin leadership in transforming undergraduate education, and the launch of the Dell Medical School. Presidents of great universities, our distinguished men and women, President Fenves has, as you've seen, amassed accomplishments that are superlative both in terms of scholarship and administrative record. However, for this occasion, other kinds of recognitions I think are in order. As provost, he lent crucial support to the expansion of Black Studies here on this campus, hiring faculty to staff our Black Studies department, helping us to remodel and expand the Gordon White Building, supporting the creation and the funding of our Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis. He has enabled us, or helped to enable us, to create a new art gallery. He's also taken down two Confederate statues, or two statues, which nobody else seemed to be able to accomplish, and taken off a heinous inscription, all right, by the Littlefield Fountain. He's also appointed he appointed two new Black vice presidents to go with the one that we already had. He's appointed a woman as the executive vice provost and executive vice president and provost, and he's got a Latino as his vice president for research. So he's done good things in terms of beginning to diversify this university. Much progress has been made towards undoing the legacy, or should I say the neo-Confederate legacy, of this institution. As provost and now president, he's played a key role in all of these things, in expanding the space for Blackness, for Black bodies, and Black ideas and knowledges on this campus. These are credentials, or the credentials, that really matter to us. President Fenves, you and your predecessor have set a very high standard that we expect you to maintain, and we know you will. I give you President Fenves.
Well, thank you very much, Ted. You bragged on me a little bit. Get ready, I'm going to brag on you also. Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to welcome so many guests and visitors to the University of Texas at Austin. And I want to acknowledge the work that Professor Gordon has done and your leadership, and thank you for your leadership of the new Department of African and African Diaspora Studies, and the decades that you have spent working on this campus for scholarship, but also for diversity and making this a institution that we can all be proud of for every individual. And you've been a core leader of that from the beginning. Now, since the official inception of the department in 2010, it has continued to raise cultural awareness on the campus and create incredible new educational opportunities for our students. And this fills a vital need for the University of Texas to carry out its mission. The ADS faculty and students do this through their scholarship and the artworks that provide a deep understanding of African and African American history and culture. And I also want to thank and congratulate all the units of Black Studies for undertaking this conference. In addition to the department, Black Studies at UT includes the Institute for Urban Policy and Research and Analysis, which Professor Gordon mentioned, and the John L.Warfield Center for African and African American Studies. And I want to give special thanks to the two co-chairs for BlackMatters Conference, Professor Minka Makalena. Where is Minka? There he is, right there. And Cherie Smith. Why don't you two stand up and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. They've done tremendous service to the university by creating this first International Black Studies Conference at UT. Looking over the panel of the program of the panel and the speakers and working with the two co-chairs, it is truly impressive. And I welcome all the scholars, the artists, and the musicians from other universities and around the world, and I hope you learn a lot and enjoy your visit to the University of Texas. Just earlier this month, we as a university celebrated with some of you are here today, the 60th anniversary of the first African American undergraduate students to enter the University of Texas at Austin. This is a group of courageous trailblazers known as the Precursors. In 1956, more than 70 of them entered a racially segregated campus that embodied the discrimination and the racism of the wider world. The University of Texas had long ignored the cries of many voices, especially Black voices, calling for equal opportunity in the university and across society. When those brave young men and women walked onto the campus for the first time in 1956, after 70 years of segregation, their struggle became even greater. But they remained undaunted in exercising their basic human rights. While many faculty and students provided support for the first African American students, the Precursors encountered much hatred. But these brave individuals were determined to pursue an education at the flagship university in the state of Texas. And their courage and perseverance 60 years ago has made a UT education possible for the generations that have followed. And those that have followed have helped break down additional barriers by showing dignity and humanity. The Precursors also laid the foundation for the activism and the push for civil rights in the 1960s that led eventually to the creation of Black Studies at UT and its important presence here on the UT campus. When students demanded the Ethnic Studies Centers be created, the university took the first step by establishing the Warfield Center in 1969, named for John L. Warfield, who led the center from 1973 to 1986. The doc, as he was known, was at the center of the Black UT community, connecting the university with the African American community off campus. And in addition to being a prominent scholar of educational psychology, Dr. Warfield launched KAZI, Austin's oldest non-commercial radio station, and one that served the needs of the African American community in Austin. He helped establish the Black Citizens Task Force, a grassroots organization committed to representing the concerns and the challenges faced by Austin's African Americans. In early 2000, Ted Gordon and Omi Jones led the center, making faculty hires that changed the face of UT and bolstered the center's role in activism, culture, and history. And about that time, the university created the Division of Diversity that has grown in stature and influence and is headed by Vice President Greg Vincent. Also in 2010, faculty and student activism led the university to establish both the African Diaspora Studies Department and the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis. And today, Black Studies is a strong, thriving program comprising a PhD granting department, Policy Institute, a center, 2 galleries, and a beautiful, newly renovated building at the center of our campus that it shares with Mexican and Latino studies. None of this would have happened were it not for the activism of faculty and students of color at UT. These and the other ethnic studies units are vital to our mission, as I mentioned earlier, and greatly contribute to the ongoing work and diversity inclusion at the University of Texas. Such diversity is essential for us to pursue excellence. The most successful educational environment, the one our society needs, nurtures the exchange of robust ideas, the sharing of cultural experiences, and the respect for one another's differences. We as a university have successfully argued for the educational benefits of diversity and our holistic admissions policy before the United States Supreme Court after 8 years of litigation. The victory this past June strengthens our resolve to create a learning environment and a community of scholars where every student knows he or she belongs, where every voice is heard, and where every experience is valued. This is how we will prepare our students to be successful and ultimately to graduate from the University of Texas to be leaders in society, and one that is increasingly complex and challenging and has many, many problems to address. This past summer, Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement, Gregory Vincent, and Vice President for Student Affairs, Cynthia Riggins-Lilly, began developing a campus-wide diversity action plan where we will examine every aspect of the UT environment and the UT experience. We've been working on the plan over the summer, starting discussions with all the constituencies next week, and we'll look for ways to improve diversity and inclusion, identify shortcomings in the university's efforts, and chart a course to advance our values and to make progress. As I said in my State of the University address a few weeks ago, we must take action by recruiting diverse students more effectively, by responding to hate incidents more quickly, and ensuring that underserved students have access to appropriate counseling, more accessible and affordable housing and transportation, and the support that a welcoming environment should provide. And while we have made progress in overcoming the legacy of past injustices, our efforts must not wane as a society or as a university. And so I congratulate you all once again for being here, Professor Smith and Makalani, the Black Studies for hosting this international conference that has been so impressive and so important for our university. And I thank the members of the UT faculty and the staff who are here, strengthening the intellectual reach of this university and enriching our campus. You are invaluable to the success of the University of Texas. We deeply value your talents and your expertise, and we're grateful for your remarkable record of achievement and for your caring support of our students from African American and other underserved communities, and being such leaders on the campus and beyond. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoy the conference, you learn a lot, and I'm looking forward to it myself. Thank you very much.
Well, we know we're going to have a good time when you start with applause. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Welcome, everybody. It is so good to be here. I think we are all being inspired and enriched. And if you're like me, you're also very proud. We've built something very special here, each and every one of us. So we should revel in it. Thank you. I am Omi Jones. I was about to say associate professor, you all. I am not. I am a professor at, that's right. And I'm hoping to corroborate this information, but I understand that 2% of the US professoriate are black women full professors. And I am very proud to be a part of that 2%. Yes, indeed. But one of 8 on campus. 1 of 8 on campus. And you understand, University of Texas has more than 2,000 faculty. So that says something. And it's a good, good crowd to be a part of. My job tonight is to introduce our featured guest this evening, our keynote speaker, performer, many, 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 many different things. And I want to tell you how we're going to organize this evening. Saul Williams is going to perform, going to share, going to speak, do his work with us. And then, you've seen this happen if you've been at some of the earlier sessions. We will have volunteers and staff moving among you if you have questions. They will be collected, they'll hand me those questions. We will give Mr. Williams a minute to catch his breath and return to the other part of the planet after doing that work, and then we'll ask him some questions. We'll see how much time we have after. So that's the structure for it. Let me begin by saying art is dangerous. Art is dangerous, which is precisely why institutions have tried consistently to stop it. From the troubadours and jongleurs of medieval Europe, to the Hubert Ogundi Theater of the 1940s in Nigeria, to the US abolition of drums and song and cross-stepped movements by enslaved Africans, institutions know that art is dangerous and have declared no truth-telling here, no life-producing vulnerability here, no thinking outside of prescribed constructions created to maintain the status quo. Audre Lorde told us that, and many of you can finish this out, poetry is not a luxury. Thank you very much. That was from the back and hands in the air. Poetry is not a luxury. Just as air, earth, water, sun, flesh are not luxuries. They are vital as Lorde said, art is. Black Studies at UT knows this and makes room for the danger. We understand that a political theory and a poem are not opposites, but expressions of the necessary multiple epistemologies that constitute Black life. Art's danger lies in the break, the space of freedom, if there is freedom, the space of the not known being birthed into existence, the space of the imagination. Who better to help us know the break, feel the break, believe the break, live inside the break, but the uncontainable Saul Williams? I say uncontainable because critics and reviewers can't land on just one identity for this iconoclastic artist. Verbal stylist, wordsmith, writer, poet, slam poet, activist, actor, rapper, singer, lyricist, how about just shapeshifter? Morphing into what spirit called him to be in order to make work in myriad forms, to create what he has called the once-in-a-lifetime experience of performance. And we will share a once-in-a-lifetime moment with him this evening. Saul Williams was born in Newburgh, New York, and attended the Newburgh Free Academy, where he told us yesterday at the Cactus Cafe that he read and loved Shakespeare as he listened to and loved Public Enemy at the same time. Headphones full of Public Enemy and a book in hand by Shakespeare. If Black Studies is nothing else, it is the insistence on the simultaneity, not the linearity, of truths. He went on to do a BA in acting and philosophy at Morehouse and was an exchange student in Brazil. He has a master's from Tisch School of the Arts at New York University, and then a different kind of education set in. In 1996, he was named the Nuyorican Poets Cafe Grand Slam Champion, a coveted award. He also has theater and film to his credit. The documentary Slam Nation led to the lead in the feature film Slam in 1998. That film won the Sundance Festival Grand Jury Prize and the Cannes Camera d'Or. Nominated for the Independent Spirit Award for Best Breakthrough Performance and won the Gotham Award for Best Breakthrough Performance with Sonia Son. He also appeared in Lackawanna Blues and was the lead in the French-Senegalese film Enjardou. I was going to do it. I was going to try. It is today. Somebody who knows French, say it for me. Thank you very much. A film that looks at a day in the life, a very special day in the life of a young man who knows this will be his last day to live. Among his theater work is the Broadway musical based on the music of Tupac Shakur, Holla If You Hear Me. First album, Amethyst Rockstar in 2001, and 5 albums later, we arrive at 2016 with his most recent project, Martin Luther King. Now, when you read that on the page, you see the word martyr, you see loser, you see king. When you say it out loud, you hear the transgression, you hear the possibilities, the multiplicities, Martin Luther King. A multimedia digital dialogue between so-called first and third worlds and the sonic energies that bind the two. From the cut Ashes on Martin Luther King, he responds to the state-sanctioned violence against Black people when he writes, "The wall between the poor and rich building, gorgeous for the police, worth $1 billion, they make a killing, protect and serve, your bullets won't deliver the last word." And to pay homage to Leslie McSpadden, mother of Michael Brown, who graced us today with her presence, her grace, and her wisdom and her generosity, we can say in solidarity with her, your bullets won't deliver the last words. He is also absolutely. He has also performed with the Fugees, Erykah Badu, Janelle Monáe, Nas, KRS-One, De La Soul, and he has 4 books of poetry. You know, I know that there are graduate students out there, I know that there are professors out there and undergrads who we write one book and we're like, oh, okay, all right. And he has now 4 books of poetry. He has delivered some of that poetry with Allen Ginsberg and Sonia Sanchez, and one of his most recognized poems, List of Demands, Reparations, offers us this. I got a list of demands written on the palm of my hands. I ball my fist, and you're gonna know where I stand. We're living hand to mouth, hand to mouth. You wanna be somebody? See somebody. Try and free somebody. And those words are very important to Black Studies. His tour schedule, because when he leaves us, he's got a lot more work to do. After Austin, he is headed to Uppsala, Sweden for the Ordsprack International Poetry Festival, and October is full. Germany, Bulgaria, Austria, Turkey, France. In closing, I think it's important for me to let him have the last word. Last night at the Cactus Cafe, in conversation with his friend, Enjambert Metoyer, close, Saul Williams said, "The best part of work is when I haven't involved anyone yet, then I let it go." Tonight, he gets to let it go with us in the dangerous necessary journey that is art. Let us welcome Saul Williams.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. President of Archaeological Indifference, Vice President of Truth, Secretary of Statistics, Minister of Celebrity and Justice, Chief of Staff and Serpent, Blessed Page Turner of the Great Book of Misdeeds and Overestimations, Bishop of the Great Climate War, Minister of the Deteriorating Sky, Baron of Epic Boredom and Self-Indulgence, all gathered notables, good evening. Hack into dietary sustenance, tradition versus health. Hack into comfort, compliance. Hack into the rebellious gene, hack into doctrine, capitalism in relation to free labor and slavery. Hack into the history of the bank. Is beating the odds a mere act of joining the winning team? Hack into desperation and loneliness, the history of community and the marketplace. Hack into land rights and ownership. Hack into business law, proprietorship. Hack into ambition and greed, hack into forms of government, systems of control, the relation to suffering and sufferance, hack into faith and morality, the treatment of one faith towards another, hack into masculinity, femininity, sexuality, what is taught, what is felt, what is learned, what is shared, hack into God, stories of creation, serpents and eggs, hack into nature, biodynamics, biodiversity, cycles and seasons, hack into time, calendars, Descartes, its relationship to doubt, is it wired to fear, the notion of control, the space-time continuum, the force of gravity, whether the opposite of gravity is freedom, hack into freedom, power, responsibility, justice, the Bill of Rights, hack into coincidence, a summer of '68, the 27 Club, the number of people with Facebook profiles, people who choose to share, people who share too much, people seem lonely, people want to connect, people want to uplift, hack into self-help, self-sufficiency, and self-indulgence, hack into crazy, hack into lunatic, hack into star, hack into infamous, notorious, the effects of the construct of poverty on the psyche, the effects of the construct of race, the victims that survived. There is a panel marked survival. 3 simple copper wires coiled round an orb, hack into orbit, equatorial landmines, useful and precious metals, coltan as cotton, hack into hazardous, nuclear, blue clear, cloud forms and fish farms, cow farts and pig shit, hack into horse, industrial, digital, hack into code, use your instrument as metaphor, harness your craft, hack into the mainframe, dismantle definition, dogma and duty, hack into destiny, hack into dreams, subtext and subconscious, hack into heart, cardio, Congo, blood rich in oil, hack into suffering and despair, hack into the unfair advantage of those lucky enough to be born into one family or another, into one condition or another, hack into the circumstantial evidence that proves the obvious and wakes the oblivious, hack into birthright, bloodlines, royal and tainted, hack into superstition, old wives' tales, rituals of the shaman, hack into DNA, chemistry, the pharmaceutical industry, the modern-day rape of the forest, hack into the coiling serpents, the time it takes modern man to determine whether ancient women were foolish or not, hack into the database, hack into the subconscious, the panel marked survival, hack into celebrity, hack into the cultural development of taste, hack into violence, fear, and ignorance. How are they linked? When I was told that I was being asked to deliver the keynote address tonight, my first question was, should I write a speech? And I was told, no, we actually want you to do what you do. And, but of course, I was enthralled by the possibility of writing a speech. I thought, okay, full disclosure, not fully enthralled. My father was a Baptist pastor, and I've dodged speech writing like I've dodged sermon writing. You know, and with time, I've grown to discover, in fact, that I really believe in poetry. I believe in its ability to connect disparate ideas, to in fact, embody that intersectionality that we are discussing in conferences like the one that is happening here now. And so I'm here tonight essentially as the entertainment. I'm here to read a few poems. I appreciate the wonderful introduction, and I did, I appreciate the so-called structure of the evening. I will use poetic license to say that we can even restructure that idea, because perhaps questions will arise as we go. And I believe also very fully in the possibilities of dialogue and the ideas that arise from questions that are asked and what have you. I am gladly going to recite poems that I guess address many of the topics that are being discussed in panels, and so I'm kind of here to bring the intellectual light work. And it's a pleasure to be here. Before I begin, though, I want to point out my man, Andre Metoyer. Primarily because it was him who connected this whole thing up about a year ago when he was like, well, he was like, I can't talk about my work and they want me to speak. Do you mind if I give them your information and maybe you could come here? My work is going to be exhibited here, and I would feel more comfortable if you were here to, maybe talk and what have you. And so we had a wonderful talk last night in public. Because we've had quite some wonderful talks privately over the years, and his work has spoken to me on levels that I find hard to articulate without poetry, and so we'll begin there. Citizens, children of the night, bearers of the day, torch scorched and burned, burn not, the dam is broken, the curse is fled. Once muddied and still the river runs, red. All those ships that never sailed, the ones with their seacocks open that lied scuttled in their stalls, today I bring them back huge and intransitory and let them sail forever if ever their recurrence uncurrent, the wind cannot serve its truth's currency. Currently moon-marked and sun-sparked, unmarked bills, will I am certain I speak a new language, as is always the first sign of a new age. I'd begun to believe my blackened toenails were on path to decay, but in truth they had begun the gradual process of crystallization. I'm he who walks on wind-scorned feet with toenails of amethyst and rose quartz, my path now crystal clear. I am come to tell you she is here. It is not written. No penman ship was ever cargoed with her character. Notebooks are carefully folded forests, void of autumn, bound from the sun. Likewise, she made a residence on the outskirts of history, on the dark side of the moon where the searchlight of the sun cannot spot her nor rot her. The seed of forbidden fruit, every tree has a hidden root, yet she has come to light the swelling Patrick of vibrant dreams, and to think of the girlfriend I was tempted to break up with because she slept too much. I now know they nurtured her there. They slept in packs, dreamt in cycles, nursed her in shifts, and became her on rotation. Unnamed every time she was named that she would not be known even unto herself. Undressed every time she was dressed that she would not be recognized anyone other than herself. They blindfolded her and spun her in circles that she would find her way here by no other means than her intuition, and she has come. I am a simple, disoriented man in her presence. I wear my loincloth over my eyes and ejaculate too soon. Forgive me, Father, if I have sinned. I prayed to you and cupped the wind, and in doing so barred her entry into a century, 100 years of solitude. I will now pray with my hands outstretched with these psalms etched into my palms. most beloved, I'm certain of nothing more than your existence. 1,000 ants crawling under a log may find themselves exposed to my childlike search for you, my collie, flower. I'm eternally destroyed by your love. No longer am I eligible for any workers' pension. My friends laugh at me and talk behind my back. They say that you've changed me, and I am. I'm like a survivor of the flood, walking through the streets, drenched with God, surprised that all the drowned victims are still walking and talking. Maybe there's hope. I rush to each victim's side, sucking what I can of you out of your various incarnations, pumping their stomachs and filling them. To touch them is to touch you, to kiss them is to kiss you. My friends, love is an art form slightly removed from its element. And one may ask, so what does this mean? I respond, I've made it up, but it shall be from now on. From now on, cities will be built on one side of the street so that soothsayers will have wilderness to wander and lovers space enough to contemplate a kiss. She kisses if she alone could forge a signature of the sun. I closed my eyes, although I never knew the difference. I stood before a brighter light at lesser distance, and then a feeling, almost if nothing were ever bound to be repeated ever again, as if history had been as masterfully created as the Great Pyramids, and to reconstruct or relive at any given moment would have to stem from an understanding of how the pyramids were built from the top down. And if one could understand such majesty, one would also understand that pyramids were first made of flesh, and that kisses are portals, our sacred breath shifting through hidden corrals and passageways. I will find my way to eternity within you. When I can feel you breathing into me, I, like a stone gargoyle atop some crumbling building, spring to life, a resuscitated angel. I sweep through city streets, my wings outstretched, making mothers clutch their young. And remember, and do you remember, dear ones, or has your history forsaken you? There are mysteries coded in songs, chants sung round fires, all incantations calling forth this day. On this day, the drunks vomit in unison, though last night they drank from different cups. Children laugh and play, introducing their parents' invisible friends. A country girl smiles and 2 trees blossom out of season. Sea suns awaken, our mother has returned away from uncertainty, once title. Twice born of wooden ships, thrice formed to mother's hips. Mother's ships grace tulips, a poet's garden. 2 for 5, they're going fast, the future's bargain. That changed to her name, the river's parting. Hurry up, things bury up, the sun is darkened. Rivers like oceans, oceans like answers. Questions in cloud forms, raindrops and stanzas. To be or not to see or not to. She had eyes like 2 turntables mixed in between. My dreams and reality blend in ancient themes. The basis of Isis cross-faded to Ankh. The beat drops like a cliff, overlooking my heart. 6,000 feet above sea level, 3,300 bodies disassembled. The head bones connected to the cockpit, knee-jerk ass backwards, dancing slaves in a mosh pit. Punk rock of Gibraltar, roll out, nothing's new. Mo blood dyes in Mohawk, only this time it's you. And you never loved her for what she possessed. You powdered her face and came on her headdress. Oil, slick feathers, putrid stench waterbed. Mother Nature's a whore, said the shotgun to the head. And it smelt like teen spirit, angst-driven, insecure. A country in puberty, a country at war. The greatest Americans have not been born yet. They are waiting patiently for the past to die. Please give blood. Those crumbled tablets were to share a story with a burning bush. Where is that voice from nowhere to remind us that the holy ground we walk on, purified by native blood, has rooted trees whose fallen leaves now color code a sacred list of demands? Who among us can give translation of autumn hues to morning news? The anchor man thrown overboard has simply rooted us in history's repeating cycle. A nation in its Saturn years that won't acknowledge karma. Where is that voice from nowhere, the ones your prophet spoke of? I hear voices of fear, disconnected from their diaphragms, dangling from coffee-covered teeth that spill into our laps and scorch our privates. There are voices from the sides of necks, some already noosed, dangling participles, pronouns running for sentence, serving life in corner offices and ghetto corners. Their voices are the same, dead to themselves, numb to the possibility of truth existing beyond that which they can palm in their hands, period. There are voices of elders that seem to do no more than damn us to our childish ways, for in many households wisdom no longer comes with age. So where is that voice from nowhere, that burning bush, that passing dove? For I hear the voices of generals calling for ammunition, presidents calling for arms, and women calling for help. Where is that voice from nowhere, that God of Abraham? Can he be heard over the gunfire, the whiz of passing missiles, the crash of buildings, the shriek of sirens, the cries of children? Or is that his mighty voice, your angry God craving the sacrifice of virgin generation sons degenerate, your holy book written in red ink on burning sands, your prayers between rounds who no more than fasten the fate of your children to the hammered truth of your trigger, a truth that mushrooms its darkened cloud of the rest of us, so we to bear witness to the short-lived fate of a civilization that worships a male God. Your weapons are phallic. All of them. That dummy that sits in your lap is no longer a worthwhile spectacle. His shrunken, pale face, he little room for imagination. We have spotted in moving lips and pinned the voice to its proper source. It is a source of madness, a source of hunger for power, a source of weakness, a source of evil. We are exiting your Coliseum and encircling your box office, demanding our families back, our cultures back, our language back, our gods back. So we return them to their proper source, the source of life, the source of creation, our mother's womb, the great goddess. We will cut through the barbed wire hangers and chastity belts. We will climb in and incubate our spirits through the winter. We will wait for the degenerate course of your repeated history. We will wait for the past to die. Thank you. That is an excerpt of a poem. Yeah, that's an excerpt of a poem. That's just the part I know by heart. The rest is longer. But it's an excerpt of a poem called Said the Shotgun to the Head, which I initially wrote, in fact, when I began writing it, I didn't know why I was writing. I had discovered the Hindu deity Kali, the goddess of destruction and creation. And I was inspired by her story and a lot of the Eastern philosophies that I was studying at that point in my life. And I was thinking heavily about the idea of, the feminine, not just the divine feminine, but feminine, the so-called divine feminine, and the idea of things needing to be destroyed in order to be rebuilt. And I worked on it for a few months, not really knowing where I was heading, and then 9/11 happened. And after that, I spent the next 4 years completing that poem. Well, we'll get to that. At the time, we had a president who's from Texas, actually. Who, upon hearing about what had happened in New York, had made a statement about, "We will show no signs of vulnerability. We will show no signs of vulnerability." And something struck me as very odd and warped about that idea of showing no signs of vulnerability. One, because we had just shown many signs of vulnerability. And two, it brought me to the question that Bessie Head raises, the question of power. And I began thinking about the role of men and of patriarchy and of the institutions founded very heavily in perpetuating that patriarchal approach to looking at the world and suppressing and oppressing voices and all these things that many argue come from the advent of the written word itself. There's a beautiful book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess, or maybe it's the Goddess versus the Alphabet, but which talks about the history of the written word and how men had used the written word itself to try to cover what had preceded some of the matriarchal and matrilineal societies that had preceded these small clusters of people who were now controlling power through written word and legislation. And like I said, I grew up in the church, where I had the special privilege of being the son of a pastor, where I could hear my dad and other men sit around behind closed doors arguing about whether they would ever allow a woman to stand on their pulpit or not, as an example. So I heard this, "We will show no sign of vulnerability," and thought about this idea of power and the idea of might being right, this sense of gusto and bravado and machismo, of like, oh, we will show no sign. And I thought, it's funny though, because there's so much power in vulnerability. The first thing I thought of was drunk drivers. I don't know why. Maybe I was drinking, but I wasn't driving. I was in New York, I didn't have a car. But I was thinking about all those cases of drunk drivers in accidents, who start approaching another vehicle and the other vehicle sees the car approaching and, they tense up and break every bone in their body, and the drunk driver is relaxed, flexible, vulnerable, and comes out unscathed. I thought about skateboarders who learn, to keep the knees bent and what have you, and who fall and get up and keep rolling, and the other ones who stiffen up and break stuff. I thought, wow. I started thinking about vulnerability as power. And, which is funny now because I have a 20-year-old daughter who's a second-year student at another school, and who's, calling me and saying stuff like, I walked out of class today. I'm not taking that class either. I'm like, why? Like, there's no way that a cis white male is going to teach me about ... And then we had this conversation the other day about vulnerability in a speaking class, and like the teacher wanting students to be vulnerable, but her being the only one of color in her class. She's like, I'm not going to show any signs of vulnerability. Oh no, they're not going to get me up there crying in front of them about no. And we're having these interesting conversations about, that's interesting. And she's saying to me, well, you're not a woman, and you're certainly not a black woman. And I'm like, true. So anyway, I just wanted to say that poem, and if there are questions, what have you, was when I began questioning, perhaps I'd begun before, but it was the process of me questioning many of the things that I was born into and had not questioned, and perhaps was afraid to question or didn't know how to question. And as we approach the realities of BlackMatters today, when I look at our community and at this society and at this country and to a further extent at the planet, I see a lot of unpacking to do. I see a lot of, I look at the role of religion, for example, as a necessary crutch to stand upright in our understanding of humanity and nature and love. And I also look at what happens if you have hurt yourself and what have you, and you're trying to redevelop the muscles in your leg. Let's say if you break that, what happens if at some point you don't let go of your crutches? If at some point you don't find the strength to stand without your crutches? And these are part of the questions that have had everything to do with me essentially standing before you today. We had a very interesting moment last night where Andrea and I were discussing process, and we were discussing dreams, and we were discussing time and our relationship to time and work, and the conversation was near its end when someone raised their hand and said, I'm very surprised that, I thought that I was going to hear you guys talk about being African American. And and of course, if this person had just waited for the conference, but when I think of what I have worked through in my own process of staying alive, I remember shooting my first film, Slam, and it being my 25th birthday when I'm actually shooting in the prison. And I'm like, well, I kind of beat the statistic. I'm 25, I'm not dead, I am in prison, but because I'm shooting a movie, and I think of that, and then I think of the statistics that were true then, which are the same now, the issues that we attempted to approach then, which are the same now, and I think of that poem where I was writing this fictitious speech in the voice of a man that was telling of the coming of a female Messiah. And when I think of today, when I think of Black Lives Matter, when I think of conferences such as this and Sharice there, when I think of Ms. Davis, who will be here tomorrow night, I acknowledge that many-bodied Messiah, so to speak, has come in the hearts and voices of so many women that I'm so happy to encounter and meet today. And it's that energy and spirit and everything that pushed my interest towards Kali in that moment. It's exactly that. It's exactly what I felt I was writing towards, so to speak. And I'm sorry to take such a long-winded approach to talk about this long fucking winded poem. But I'm trying to find a way to say that what we face today, well, there's two things I'm trying to say. One is I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really happy that this is happening. And it's been a long time coming, so to speak. And I know that this is not only happening here, that there are other conferences and other universities across the campus. I've visited over 500 universities. And in fact, what is happening now, as we all know, is so crucial. And when you talk about those 8 professors here, right, and that 2%, and what that means to our country, and what those voices mean to our growth, and what those women mean to our life and family, and to our ability to just speak the fuck up courageously, thank you. So, By the way, forgive my language. Her stomach, bloated with indigo silence, she birthed a nation of loud motherfuckers that set fire to her womb as they exited and called it the sun. The father of sweat, the father of rain, out of heat comes humidity, out of fire comes water, and out of the sun's fire water came the plants and trees that call her name in the darkness as she stares one-eyed and raises the tide in an attempt to kiss the blood of her burning womb. This is my blood which is shed for you, motherfuckers are undeserving. Cyclops that she is, she still gives, even though we label her followers lunar ticks. Tucks, ticks, the working day is over. And we rest our perceptions under the indigo silence as she emits, as she stares into our mind's eye, deciphering the universe in our dreams. And we dream of burning crosses and Salem witches, star-crossed bitches and moon kisses that caress our subconscious like motherly hums and play our soul strings acoustic to we awaken to the flames of her burning womb, engulfed in the vaginal volcanoes of velvet illusions, daylight delusions, dear God, confusion. These motherfuckers are too loud and I can't hear myself in the wind as I sing tornadoes to my children and hum hurricanes under my breath. I'm being beckoned by the bastards of another day as nothing consecrated in love anymore, but my love children of this generation die labeled lunar ticks. Tucks, ticks, the working day is over. And I am full with the indigo pains of a blood-stained womb as I stare one-eyed and raise the tide in an attempt to kiss the blood of my burning womb. This is my blood which is shed for you motherfuckers are undeserving. Forcibly penetrating my indigo silence in the name of the Father and the Son. And out of the sun's gates come little girls in dresses of fire, wearing pigtails of braided smoke which stem from their moon-cratered scalps, the glowing seeds of a nightly garden that will blossom in the full moons regardless of the sun. They know the night and the 7 names of the wind through the tales of their wind-blown fathers. Who will father these mothers of light, and what will become of me, children of the night? Only some will star the sky, only believers in death will die, and fathers must feather the wings of women. For the unfeathered masses dangle ridiculous, carrying crosses to phallic-filled tombs. The future sails silent through blood-rivered wombs that ripple with riddles of cows and spoons and births, moons and earth, sun-centered at noon. She buries her eggs in the soil and plants her feet in the sky. Soil sees a circus of carrots and clowns, and minstrel shows our desires, and here I stand, court gesturing infinity, fetal-fisted for revolution, but open hands birth humility. Now what is the density of an eagleless planet? Must my spine be aligned to sprout wings? I'm slouched in the slang steps and Kango with gang reps in my orbit, rainbows, Saturn's rings, mystical, elliptical, presto, polaris, karmic flame, future in Saturn's and Aries, and now I'm a fish called father with gills type dizzy, blowing liquid lullabies through the spine of time to tranquilize the nervous system's defeat. At the feet of forever, the children are gathered, or rather buried in that mass graveside of the night. They are the seeds of light planted in the sky, but then nights and skies are meaningless through unearthly eyes. They are our children, playing chess on the sunburnt backs of one-eyed turtles, checkmating a lifetime slow crawl to enlightenment, cashing in their crown and glory for magic and contradiction. The children of fiction, born of semen-filled crosses thrust in Calvary's mound, with memories of Manana's millennium, the gravity of the pendulum, the inscription of the grail, the rumors of warm famine, diseases, and storms of hail. All hail the new beginning, behold the winter's end. Bring on the puppets and dragons that the ceremonies begin, for they have come to shatter time and bring back the dead newborn, an army of me, bearing change in the front lines and shadows in the field mines to wilderness, the lights of the city. I have seen them, a tumultuous army of bastards and beggars, madmen and idiots, witches and harlots, dancers and lunatics, sinners and singers, losers and lovers, students and teachers, poets and priests, orbiting the realms of the ordinary through the ordinances of those ordained by the beast. These are our children, love-laden life lanterns, casting shadows that shepherd the flocks, crying wolf in the moon's full, as sirens of love's lull. The offspring of Gibraltar's rocks, who will deny them and thrice crows the cock? Will it be you, Peter? Decked in Daymare's denial, masqueraded in matter, overmined, under trial. Self is a servant to serpents with wings. 3 is the beginning of all things. Triangles and rectangle your wings. Let vision blur not your deservings. Piled stones and unearth ancient learning. See self as the ghost of your servings. If you're serving the Father, there's no son without mother. Parent bodies discover water bodies and drown. Wade me in the water till Atlantis is found. On the seafloors of self, I'm starfish and unbound. Heard the name of that mound is Stone Mountain. Underwater volcanoes erupt, water fountains of youth. Let this calmly equation cancel out wind and truth. Throw me beyond sometimes, drench me waterproof. Let eaves drop forever, rain sunsets on my roof. As I sit on the front porch of my sanity, deciphering hand bones to Van Gogh this vanity. Oiled egos, canvas and framed, to be reborn, unborn, unburied, unnamed. A reflection through a blood-stained glass window of souls gone yellow around the edges. Carbonated dreams and blurred daily lives, but let family bring focus out of swamps, blossom lotus, the muddy water, blue daughters of infinity. Grant re-water-bodied bodhisattvas our serenity as we rise with the tides towards divinity, and she will be raised by wolves just below the Masonry-Dixon line, where eagles noose the misuse of Osiris's sacred papyruses and their claws clench, so the vultures of our memories may feast upon the remedies of ancient laws lynched, and flock to the treetops of the forethoughts we have forgotten. Yes, silence will be begotten of the wind. The silver eyes of the darkness are her friends, and they sometimes plant forever in their dens, on a mountainside of sometimes now and then. In between the rise and set of you and I, may blue visions know the depths of liquid skies, and some ask me if she cries in the night, when it's the substance of her tears that drench the days with light. Shit, you better hope she do. Because they're women with fur coats and painted faces, dancing on the peripheries of perfection. They eat Chinese apples that stain their teeth red, and can cackle cosmos out of chaos at a moment's notice. The children on the train, selling chocolate with the mothers in the background, fundraising their dreams from the dead. And the authors of autumn correspond to catharsis and change the leaves of my needs are in dread. I need fruit and vegetables, for only living things can feed the span of wings, and thus she was born to charter my flight into the blues of night. I am the darkness that precedes the light, a pupil of the sea's reflective sight. Notebook in hand, I footnote land and write, plot dot, 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 and dot my eyes as bright, and cast my lot amongst the children and the night. Thank you. Before I go any further, correct, is it okay if we open the floor? Then why don't we do that? Because I would like to do that before I move on into other poems and what have you. Perhaps there are questions, responses, or anything related to anything that I've said thus far, and I feel like I've said a lot. If there are any, feel free. Otherwise, I shall continue. Are you okay? Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask, in regards to things like emotion, logic, intensity, bravado, what forms of rhetoric are most effective in provoking change from your experience?
That's interesting. It's a great question. What forms of rhetoric? Well, in terms of provoking change, it's interesting. I'm a big fan of Octavia Butler, who in the parable of the sower and talents has this religion that is created, and this saying that served as a mantra for me, which was, God is change, right? When we talk about provoking change, I believe that there is also an inevitability to and through our provocation, right? I had an album once called The Inevitable Rise and Liberation of Niggy Tardust. But inevitable was the key. It was to say that if you don't think that there will be a moment such as now where people will not be able to take it. I know what it felt like to grow up when I did, essentially in the 80s, right? With this sense of entitlement and this sense of hearing stories from my parents and going to class and realizing that I wasn't being taught what I expected to be taught because I had been taught some other stuff at home and I knew what was up and I knew what they were leaving out and the little token boxes and all this stuff. And I remember feeling this sense of entitlement and of course I would try to essentially unemotionally engage my professors in dialogue that in many ways was beyond their control, but I knew that there was something because they were dealing with the curriculum, right? And with these old books that had been handed to them and told, this is what you do and blah, blah, blah. This is before college. So I knew what it felt like to grow up feeling entitled and to feel like this has taken a long time, like this, it's not supposed to be like this. I mean, I felt like that. I still feel that way. I mean, you look at us celebrating like, you know, people's rights for marriage and what have you, which is like something that I fully understood at the age of 4. And I really don't understand what took so long, you know, until you understand what took so long. and which is part of the reason why you'll find in my work me, you know, not only talking about like Read Dark Money by Jane Myers or something, I'm also like on unpacking our relationship to religion versus spirituality and what have you, because like I said, I stood in rooms where men were discussing so many of these things and were hindered, and progress was hindered by these so-called gatekeepers. So, provoking change can come about through many ways. I don't know if I have one, you know, if I could say, it's through emotion, it's through this, it's through that. I believe in art. And I can speak to that, you understand? It's the reason, you know, but part of the reason, I would say the entirety of the reason why, you know, I do what I do is because of my steadfast belief in the power of art. It's also the reason why sometimes I get frustrated with, you know, listening to, you know, what's popular, or it's sometimes, you know, I'll find myself like, what? Oh, you had an opportunity to say something, do something, spark something, provoke something, you know? Because a lot of times art can move way faster than policy. And if you ever find yourself questioning the role of art, you know, I mean, there's tons of examples you can give, but you think of the fact that, like, for example, the US was allied with Germany before, you know, Chaplin's The Dictator. And what that film did to society, how it reached policy, same thing with Stevie Wonder and our, you know, Dr. King celebration. You know, birth of a well, don't get me started. I'm sorry, yeah. But yeah, I would say that art itself has that power. Fela Kuti said, music is the weapon of the future, right? And it has this way of seducing and engaging, and the listener, music itself, its ability to harmonize, you know, and to harmonize people in a room. It can be the thing that, you know, people from other sides of reality have in common, you know? It's a beautiful platform. So I would say that art itself has that power. I don't know if I could point to one, you know, form of rhetoric, as you call it. Yes?
So you've already sort of answered this, but with the increasing frequency of the commercialization of art, specifically Black and Latino art, how have you maintained authenticity in your work? And how do we inspire authenticity and activism in younger artists?
Well, you know, we're living in interesting times in terms of the commercial exploitation of art, although it's something that has always occurred. And it's occurred in major ways for quite some time, especially when you think of African-American artists and their relationship to the recording industry, for example. I remember, for example, living in Paris for a minute and signing a record deal in France. And the standard record contract in France was completely different. I had about 45% more rights given to me in a standard contract before a lawyer was involved in France, primarily because when they created record contracts, it was there to go between French people and French people out of the utmost respect for each other, to make sure that they were going to be compensated for what they did. There was no idea of, like, well, it's blacks who are making the music, and so we don't need to give them, da, da, da. So there was this level of fairness in a standard contract that blew my mind. Now, with your question, I think about the question of, as I said in a poem which I began with, hack into, it's called Colton is Cotton. And one of the last ideas in that is the idea of the cultural aesthetic, right? And how taste is developed within a culture. You could find that very oftentimes with comedy. Something is really funny in one culture and you bring that same comic to another place, could be the same language, but it's not the same humor. And so it's just like, well, okay, the British comics, it's not really that funny. But that has to do with, all the nuances of culture. And the nuances of our culture, which is so heavily, populated by and connected to the industry, has, for some time now, as you stated, been heavily exploited by this sense of, this is how we're making money, so let's just repeat that. So you have all these franchise things, and you have all these people getting further and further away from even being able to appreciate, let's say, an independent film. They look at it like, that doesn't look, why is it so dark? Because they've been watching like bullshit lighting on a TV show where no one's paying attention to frames, or it's a regular sitcom or whatever. The lighting is all the same, everything is bright, and so when they start encountering nuances, they're like, I think there's something wrong with, like there's this sense of it begins to affect what we appreciate or what we know how to appreciate. Whereas now we may even have this sense of like, I saw this happening for the past 15 years, where the idea of, like when they started talking about conscious hip hop and backpacker hip hop, and this idea that was separate from entertainment. As if Bob Marley was separate, as if Nina Simone was separate, as if Bob Dylan was separate, as if, the list goes on and on and on, but these things go in cycles. So what have I done? I have essentially remained a student. I have studied and been inspired by a series of references, artistic, cultural, literary, political references, those who have come before, those who are here now, who have in many ways faced similar questions and circumstances and realities, and who decided to stay, steadfast in their work. And, there's tons of names that's making me feel like I gotta read this poem, Coded Language, because there is a list of names of people that have inspired me, and who all found ways. Like, for example, when, as a young kid, when I came home at 8 years old, I told my parents, I want to be an actor when I grow up. And my father said immediately, I'll support you as an actor if you get a law degree. I was 8, so I didn't know to rebel or anything. I was just like, okay. And my mom said immediately, she was like, then you should do your next school report on Paul Robeson. Turns out, my next school report, which was actually my first school report, because I was 8 at the time, I was like, okay, 3rd grade, I have to write a report now. I have to choose a figure from history. I'm gonna do it on Paul Robeson. And his legacy and story has inspired me greatly through the years in staying steadfast on my mission in terms of doing what I love and finding a way to make sure that it maintains its relevance for the times, not just in terms of of taste and accessibility, but also in terms of speaking to the times, you know? And it's been a careful balance for me. Because, you know, someone may walk away from something that I share, and they may be, you know, enthralled by, let's say, the content. And I go, yeah, but the content wouldn't have reached you if I hadn't styled it the way I did. But you're not paying attention to the style. You're just talking about the content. But there's tons of people with that same content, but it's the style that brought it there. And so it's all those nuances of, like, I'm labeling them as references, you know? Meaning that people would say, have you read this? Have you seen this movie? You don't know this filmmaker? Or you never read this novel? No, you need to read this. You need to, and so I've just had a way of, because, you know, I'm not the first to encounter a question such as that, and the reality of that, you know, regardless of the changing times, you know, there are countless women and countless people that have been forced to find a way to find the intersection between their creative spirit and the industry or the population or where we are creatively now, but what I'm trying to do over here. And there's always been this dance, so to speak. And so, yeah, what have I done to maintain that sort of relevancy, or I'm not sure exactly what was the word you used, but to that focus? I basically have stayed steadfast as a student. I've continued being inspired by the countless voices of those that have come before, and I've gone deeper by going sometimes to the countries and cultures where their voices have come from, and being turned on by the stuff, you know, that not only is not in that history book, but isn't on that bookshelf and isn't in that top sellers list and was banned for 30 years. And, you know, we had a great conversation about, you know, Haitian literature the other day, you know, and banned books, you know. I've read a lot of banned books. That's how. I'll take that question now and do another poem, sure.
Thank you. Thank you. My heart is racing. You like my favorite.
Thank you.
How do you articulate and you express so, like, poetically? How do you teach that? How do you teach the esoteric power of sound that you share so well? Like, when I talk to my students and my friends and my family, and I talk to them about the power, the words and sound, and I feel like I don't know how to articulate it the way I should. Do you have any references, or like, how do you do that?
I asked a great artist last night about teaching, and his response was, I like to think of myself as a coach. I don't think you can teach this stuff, but if it's there, I can coach it. Brother Ray, I don't know if you're around, but let me read this poem, because I think there's part of the response is in that, because in fact, it's what I was thinking about when I wrote this poem. The power of language, the power of words. I remember, you know, I remember very specifically where I was when I found out that Biggie was killed and Tupac was killed, and all those moments. And I remember before either of those deaths being very concerned, because I had started reading poetry, and from the moment I started reading poetry, my life shifted into all of these, like, dimensions of calling things into my life. And so, of course, I started thinking very heavily about the power of language and what we call into our lives. And so even by the time I encountered Ready to Die, I was like, yo, Ready to Die? Careful, right? Especially when it's, you know, music, you know, so it's coming louder through speakers. And, you know, and we're all repeating it. And for years, I've had questions about what happens when we en masse repeat these mantras when we know that collectively, I mean, in all of these like religious ideologies and what have you, and disciplines, there's always been this sense of the power of sound. There's a reason why they tell you to, to recite these prayers and recite these mantras or these Hail Marys or any of this stuff. There's always been this sense of what you say will, it'll build something around you. So, your question, how do you teach that? My continuous response to any of these questions that I've had has been along the lines of trying to be an example or set an example through the work itself. Because otherwise I don't know if it's a matter of teaching it or a matter of pointing it out, because it's already evident in people's lives. If you just can help people pay attention to the slightest details of, you hear it when you see people say self-deprecating stuff, and stop saying that. Don't say that about yourself. We have those little practices, right? But it happens on a larger scale as well. So anyway, whereas break beats have been the missing link connecting the diasporic community to its drum-woven past. Whereas the quantized drum has allowed the whirling mathematicians to calculate the ever-changing distance between rock and stardom. Whereas the velocity of spinning vinyls spun backwards and re-released at the same given moment of recorded history, yet a different time and time's continuum has allowed history to catch up with the present, we do hereby declare reality unkept by the changing standards of dialogue. Statements such as keep it real, especially when punctuating or anticipating modes of ultra-violence inflicted psychologically or physically, will henceforth be seen as retroactive and not representative of the individually determined is. Furthermore, as determined by the collective consciousness of this state of being, and the lesson distance between thought patterns and their secular manifestations, the role of men as listening receptacles is to be increased by a number no less than 70% of the current enlisted as vocal aggressors. Motherfuckers better realize, now is the time to self-actualize. We have found evidence that hip-hop standard at 85 RPM, when increased by a number at least half the rate of its standard, or decreased to 3/4 of its speed, may be a determining factor in heightening consciousness. Studies show that when a given norm is changed in the face of the unchanging, the remaining contradictions will parallel the truth. Equate rhyme with reason, sun with season. Our cyclical relationship to phenomenon has encouraged scholars to erase the centers of periods, thus symbolizing a non-linear character of cause and effect. Reject mediocrity. Your current frequencies of understanding outweigh that which has been given for you to understand. The current standard is the equivalent of an adolescent restricting the diet of an infant. The rapidly changing body would acquire dysfunctional and deformative symptoms and could not properly mature on a diet of applesauce and crushed pears. Light years are interchangeable with years living in darkness. The role of darkness is not to be seen as or equated with ignorance, but the unknown and the mysteries of the unseen. Thus, in the name of Robeson, Godson, Hurston, Akhenaten, Hatshepsut, Blackfoot, Helen, Lennon, Kahlo, Kali, the Three Marias, Tara, Lilith, Lord, Whitman, Baldwin, Ginsburg, Kaufman, Lumumba, Gandhi, Gibran, Shabazz, Siddhartha, Medusa, Guevara, Gurdjieff, Rand, Wright, Banneker, Tubman, Hamer, Holiday, Davis, Coltrane, Morrison, Joplin, Du Bois, Clark, Shakespeare, Rachmaninoff, Ellington, Carter, Gay, Hathaway, Hendricks, Cootie, Dickerson, Ripperton, Mary, Isis, Teresa, Hansberry, Tesla, Plath, Rumi, Fellini, Michaud, Nostradamus, Nefertiti, Laroque, Shiva, Ganesha, Yemaya, Oshun, Obatala, Ogun, Kennedy, King, Four Little Girls, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Keller, Biko, Marley, Magdalene, Shakur, those who burn, those still aflame, and the countless unnamed. We claim the present as the present, as the hereafter. We are unraveling our navels that may ingest the sun. We are not afraid of the darkness. We trust that the moon shall guide us. We are determining the future at this very moment. We know that the heart is a philosopher's stone. Our music is our alchemy. We stand as the manifested equivalent of 3 buckets of water and a handful of minerals, thus realizing that those very buckets turned upside down supply the percussive factor of forever. If you must count to keep the beat, then count. Find your mantra and awaken your subconscious. Carve your circles counterclockwise. Use your cipher to decipher coded language, man-made laws. Climb waterfalls and trees. Commune with nature, snakes and bees. Let your children name themselves and claim themselves as the new day. For today, we are determined to be the channelers of these changing frequencies into songs, paintings, writings, dance, drama, photography, carpentry, crafts, love, and love. We enlist every instrument, acoustic, electronic, every so-called gender, race, sexual orientation, every person as beings of sound to acknowledge their responsibility to uplift the consciousness of the entire fucking world. Thank you. And for me, that poem was my moment of needing to enunciate in my weird-ass way that words matter, that what we say matters, and that, and of course, beyond that, it's not only what we say is a reflection of how we think and what have you, and it was the beginning of me trying to organize my thoughts so that I could essentially answer your question in a sense, which I'm not really doing. But how do you teach that? Oh. You know, other than coaching someone to acknowledge the role that language plays in their lives, maybe through a series of experiments or games. I come from theater. I'm a theater school kid, you know? I wrote my first poem in an improvisation class, you know, and I felt like I built my poetic imagination because of the sort of things that I was doing by playing theater games and improvisation and what have you. And then I grew up and saw, you know, that those same games are the same things that they were trying to do in self-help classes and what have you. I was like, I did that in theater school. I think that, I think we're at an interesting time. I really don't have the answer to your question, you know, because it's not to say that we can't play with language and we can't play with and provoke ideas through language that may be violent at times and playful at other times and provocative at times and what have you. But to engage with a student for them to learn the power of words, good luck. You know, I think you're on that path through the question itself. But I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see. Are there any other questions? I know that time is ticking and yes.
I have a question. Well, first I want to commend you for being an artist and doing your passion, because I know in your field, especially actors as well, and art, a lot of people criticize it, and art is dangerous because people don't understand it. And Proverbs 18:16 says that your gift will make room for you and bring you in front of great men, which I believe is done for you. My question to you is, growing up in the church, because I did too, I was a pastor's. Everybody is in the church every day. Couldn't even go play football because I had to go to church. So,
Yeah, I know about that. My dad didn't want me to be on the basketball team because I would miss dinner and family thing before, but I did it.
Exactly.
I talked him out of it.
My question is, growing up in the church and learning and being around it and involved in it so much, almost forcefully, because you have to at that point in your life. When you got to the point to where you were doing your own thing and you could really look and read for yourself, how did that evolve you to really do your own research, and how did that evolve your passion and your drive for what you're doing, and how are the things you're studying now conflicting with some of the things or the logic that's in the Bible?
Well, you know, you choose your battles wisely, right? Personally, I never had any beef with the red letters in the Bible, for example, you know? My beef was just with the men that had built the institution around it, you know? And beyond that, it was a matter of certain heavy-handed interpretations. The example I could give, for example, is the idea of repenting, right? So growing up in the church, I heard much about you better repent. And from what I understood and what I got from the church was repent meant it meant to fall on your knees and beg for forgiveness. Like, oh God, I'm repenting for my sins. And when I got into deeper and deeper into my interest in some of the questions you're raising, but also in poetry and language and etymology and all of these things, I realized, one, that, repent comes from Latin, like I speak French, penser means to think, repent means to think, repent means to think again. And sin comes from Hebrew. It's a word that means to miss the target. And so I started thinking, okay, so if you miss the target, think again, was way more empowering than if you go against what I say, fall on your knees and beg, right? And I realized that I was dealing with, like I said, some heavy-handed interpretations that were actually getting in the way of my spiritual growth and understanding. And so, I had some very heated conversations with my dad, but the most beautiful one was not heated. And it was at that moment, because I had questions from the time I was little. I remember a Jewish girl in my elementary school named Jory Mazzola, who would share her snack and help you with your homework. And if you forgot homework, be like, do you need me to help you with this before da-da-da-da? But, I could not believe how cool and kind this person was, to the point where I came home one day and was just like, this girl's Jewish, she's born into a Jewish family, but I have never seen anybody doing unto others like her. Is she going to hell? And so my dad would be like, until she accepts the Lord Jesus Christ as her Savior. And that was about the time that I was afraid to say it, but I was on the cusp of bullshit. Because then I had to look up Christ as the idea of the embodiment of love. And so I just started replacing it love. You don't have to belong to this organization. And then I started realizing, wait, what is it so much about belonging to that? No, religion is man-made, but religion belongs to us. Why is it so important to us to belong to this thing? And I asked my dad, because I'd encountered this book called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, which had Jesus in those 18 years that he's not in the Bible, between 12 and 30, he ain't there. And it was written by this dude called Levi, and it had him studying meditation in Tibet and, getting the mysteries and secrets in Egypt and hanging with Brahmins in India, and then arriving back at the age of 30. And it was a fantastic thing to read as a kid who had grown up afraid to even ask questions because some of the questions seemed like sins. And I read that and was like, huh? And I came home and was like, yo! And as I'm saying, yo, I'm in my dad's library and I see the book. I'm like, you have this book? You have this book? Well, how? I mean, if you know what I've been feeling, which is that our understanding of love is so much greater than the institutions of religious doctrine and control, which have so much to do with the suppression. I mean, sex and power, sex and power, sex and power, sex and power, suppress the women, control the women. Like, it's so heavy with that shit that, aside from the other side, which is just the passing on of information, right? Which is wonderful. You know, like if you're born in the desert 40 years from now, just so you know, don't eat this, wash like this, let me, you know, that stuff was helpful, right? To go on through. It's not as helpful anymore. Like, we're washing feet, but it's like, do I have to take my Timbs off? You know, like, it's not the same, but at the time you understand. But anyway, I'm talking to my dad, like, so if you can understand my interest in, let's say, you know, these Buddhist tenets and how there's not one contradiction between these Buddhist tenets or these words in the Tao and the red letters in that book. So why are you over here teaching this? And my father was like, I was an only child, and I grew up in the church, and the church was my family, and I just felt like if I spoke outside of that, then, because he was a part of the Baptist Missionary Convention and all this thing, if I went that way, then I'd be out of the family. And I wanted to be. And at that point, I had this a kind of newborn respect or understanding where I was like, oh, because I'd asked him another question. It was kind of stupid, but then his response tripped me out, which was like, I have 2 older sisters. I was like, do you love me and my sisters equally? And he was like, no. I love you equitably. Because some of you need more and in different ways, and you know. And I was like, okay, this dude is interesting though, huh? It was so quick, his response, no. Like he had been thinking about it. I was like, what the hell? But anyway, at some point, my interest in, let's say, even the teachings of Christ, right? That would be the main thing that would lead me out of the church. It was my interest in that. That's what led me to investigating like Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and Hinduism and all of these different things and connecting and wanting to connect the dots. It was actually inspired by what I got from there and what the distinction between what I was getting from there and the laws of the institution. Like I said, when I sat in those rooms here, like, I was not the man. I was like, well, who wrote this? I remember my freshman year at Morehouse. I never forget that history professor, Dr. Leroy Davis. And he was like, this is kind of what freed me to ask questions. It was the first day of history class. And he was like, how many of you brothers and sisters are Christian? It's Morehouse, so half the motherfuckers in the room were like, the other half had bow ties and, you know. And it's the 90s. And he's like, all right, so who can tell me who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? I taught Sunday school from the time I was like 12. Everybody was, those are the books of history written by Moses. He was like, you mean to tell me he dies in the 2nd book and went on to narrate what happened after his death? It's like, the bullshit you learn in Sunday school will not pass you in this class. You know, let me just say, because I could respond to this question all day, but I do want to say that when we are here discussing BlackMatters and all of the beautiful content and dialogue that's happening in these panels, I often look at our relationship to religious ideology and question how far we'll be able to go without questioning some of it. And I'm not speaking about spirituality. But we have to find the strength to question, to step beyond these things sometimes that we're born into. I was born through a lot of, you know, I mean, this is Texas. Some people here were like born in Texas. I'm fucking around. I'm from New York. I had to make that joke. I'm joking, but I say that jokingly to say that the strength that we feel through each other and our relationship to humanity and to our understanding of love and society and the need for progression, nothing can or should get in the way of that. And the power held within many of these institutions, which we choose to identify with and associate with or belong to, have reached a point in our progress, which is extremely interesting, right? If you think of the voodoo, candomblé, santeria, and all this stuff, and here, our relationship to our spiritual practice, that is our, you know, the way that we rooted ourselves in this place. And we know what the church signified for the civil rights movement and for so much of our movement and progression in this country. Now, it's a different time and story. And many of us in our understanding of society and progression and what's needed and where we are and how things will move forward are oftentimes finding ourselves a few steps ahead of our pastors, just saying. Yeah. And we have to find the courage to deal with that. And when I think about this conference or any other conference that, you know, dares to approach this and these subjects, which have a lot to do with what we are experiencing in the context of this country, although we can connect dots to what's happening across the world, you know? But I know that when I go to Haiti or if I'm in the Congo, it's still fuck the police, even though the police look like me. And it brings me back to that question of power and that question of authority and how we challenge it and how we provoke the change as necessary, whether through rhetoric or through action. We have to find that courage to question ourselves and the role that we play in perpetuating bullshit that has no place here anymore. And thank you and good night. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
For some years, we had a tradition in Black Studies to give particular gifts to our guests. And we thought it would be fitting to give you, Mr. Williams, Dear Girl, A Reckoning, Drea Brown's book. One of our graduate students. We want to pass it on in the spirit of outrageous poetry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.